And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. So we're on a little bit of a journey here talking through the exit of our company. And friends, I have exciting news for you in a few episodes, but I want to continue this journey because so many people attempted or did or are going through a transition process as we speak. As I mentioned in the last episode, the government last year, through all their glorious wisdom, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, decided that it was a good idea potentially to raise the rates on long-term capital gains. At one point, it was real close to 50%. And so for us business owners, if we have goodwill sale, many times we have self-generated goodwill, and thus there is really no basis in our company. So when we go to sell our company, if we're selling assets or stock, then a vast majority of the gains from our companies are going to be taxed at capital gains. Very, very common there. So last year in 2021, as Q4 was revolving and Congress was talking about the tax rates that they were looking in the Build Back Better plan, this idea of a 50% capital gains rate scared so many business owners, especially those who were considering selling in the next 5 to 10 years. The reason for that is valuations were moving up. Cash is very fluid as I record this, and taxes were still yet low. So it made a lot of sense that if you were considering selling your business, that was a proper time to do it. So we began working, as I mentioned in the last mini episodes, late 2021, with many, almost a dozen, if not more. I can't remember the exact number of clients that were in process or desired to sell their business. Some did, some didn't. And along that journey, even though the desire was there, roadblocks came about. There were roadblocks for closing. And so today I want to talk about the roadblocks that you need to be aware of if you're going to sell your business. I remember early in my career, this is almost 20 years ago now, when I first came in, we had to learn life insurance. And at the time, the financial world was not as comprised as it is today, where you had fee-only planners. In fact, fee-only was almost not even heard of, existent outside of a few select groups. But you had insurance companies that would proper investments or insurances. And I had to learn how to sell insurance. As I mentioned in the past, I'm not a great salesperson. It drives me crazy to try to sell things. I love to teach. I love to provide information and let people make a decision, but I'm not a salesperson. And I can remember this one case that a friend of mine in the office was working on. It was sizable. It was going to give him $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 of revenue. It was a pretty sizable case. And he made this statement. He said, "Justin, what you don't understand is this. I just had the client who says, yes, let's go, and I want this done. But now there are a dozen people between me getting a paycheck and the client getting what they want who really don't care. They really don't care. They're roadblocks to me." And he had to navigate all those various roadblocks in order to get that client what they needed and what they wanted for their finances. But I never forget that. He said, man, there are so many people who don't care or don't understand the process that they just create roadblocks, and we've got to figure out how to get around them. So as you're thinking about this sale, you may have a suitable buyer. You may have had a broker, or you may have had an exit planner who found somebody who is interested in buying your business. But there will be roadblocks. There will be challenges that you will have to overcome, that you will have to work with in order to consummate the deal. One of the first are attorneys. Now, you've heard me in the past. I've done many episodes about attorneys. I've had, many attorneys on the show for the last 4 or 5 years. Attorneys, to me, and I say this often, attorneys are like a chainsaw. Now, I live on a farm. We use power tools on a regular basis. There's one instrument that I don't like, and that's a chainsaw. I have to use it frequently because we live in the woods. I have to often clear trees or cut firewood or deal with brush or down limbs on fences. I have to deal with chainsaws regularly. But every single time I use a chainsaw, I'm scared that it's going to kick back, that the chain, which is spinning at a rapid rate, which can rip through the hardest wood in the forest, can just slightly move back and hit my face, hit my hand, hit my leg. As a teenager, I had a chain hit my right calf, when I was about 100 foot up in a pine tree. And to this date, I have 3 scars on the back of my leg where within a split second, that chain from a chainsaw ripped through my protectors, gaiters, and cut into my calf muscle. Pretty deep. So I don't like a chainsaw. Here's the thing. Whenever I use a chainsaw, they have to be razor sharp and they have to be super powerful. I also say attorneys are like chainsaws. You want them to be so sharp that whatever they touch, they cut. And you want them to be so powerful that at the end of the day, whoever is wrestling with them is worn out. So we're going to deal with attorneys. You as a seller, or perhaps you as the buyer, and the seller or buyer will have separate counsel. There will be attorneys involved. And I've seen this many times where the buyer and the seller will look at the attorneys and say, get the deal done. But yet both sides are there to advocate for their best interest of their clients. I've seen in the past 6 months where attorneys have begun arguing over periods or commas, as I say. A word could be slightly changed. It can be slightly tweaked. They move into preservation mode, oftentimes causing the deal to bog down. And even I saw this last 6 months, somebody walk away because of the legal side of things. On the buyer side, the attorney is going to attempt to protect the client's interest, the buyer's interest. They're going to look for potential skeletons in the closet. They're going to try to through words and through language, get the best protection they can for the buyer, and candidly to the detriment of the seller. And from the seller side, the attorney is going to be working to try to attempt to hide the skeletons in the closet. Things that could cause the value to drop, things that could cause damage to the seller later on. The attorneys are going to look at organizational documents, and they may have to do some discoveries back and forth. So, as you go into the sale, one of the things that you need to be aware of is that attorneys are razor sharp. You're going to have them, and you need them, friends. You need them. You want to chainsaw an attorney who is sharp as can be, that's so powerful that no matter what it touches, it rips it to pieces. You want that person on your side. But as you go through that process, you as the seller or buyer have to realize that the attorney is there for protection. And sometimes you have to say enough's enough. We're willing to take on some risk. We can't de-risk ourselves completely. We're going to have to move forward. We have to quit arguing over commas and periods. Sometimes you have to do that. So attorneys are often a roadblock that you have to deal with. The second one is the financing or bankers. How is the deal going to be paid for? Very seldom in today's market, and I haven't seen this often, with today's loan rates, you're not going to see many people who are going to pay cash for a business. They're going to borrow money because cash is cheap, even to this day as I'm recording this episode. But the banker is going to look at the deal totally different than the lawyer. The lawyer is going to look at it from a legal perspective, making sure you, the seller, is protected legally. The banker is going to be looking at it as a person who has invested interest to make sure that the loan can be paid back. I can remember a performer that I did. I built a performa for a business selling. I had the CPA help me. This is one of the personal ones that I touched last year. Built a performa, got involved in it, had to normalize the expenses. The CPA and I approved it together. She and tax advisor double-checked the data inputs. We double-checked our projections. We wanted to make sure everything was conservative. We did this back in September, and at year end, we were within $2,000 of most of our numbers. We were pretty close in our assumptions. We gave it to the bank, and the bank then sent back a list of questions on why did you make these assumptions X, Y, Z? And it was literally about 2 pages long that took me about 5 hours to go through and answer the questions. I gave it to the CPA, gave it to the attorney, let them double check, make sure that we were all on a board as we were preparing the bank. We gave it to the bank. The bank loved the deal. They loved the deal. They saw the benefits of the business. They saw the revenues. They saw the risk of the business. They were ready for an LOI. So we entered into a letter of intent. We put the provisions in the letter of intent. And now we're talking to the prospective buyers. So we were overcome the banker, And now we're dealing with a prospective buyer who is working with the bank. The bank is now going through their finances. Lo and behold, it wasn't an issue with the business. It was an issue with the prospective buyer having some credit issues. This happens often in the world of finance. It's not uncommon. People live life. They do the best they can. But the bankers in this case wanted a pristine credit score, which is hard, especially after 2020 for so many. And this particular prospective buyer just didn't fit what the bank's expectations were. So here we are with the seller who has already got a buyer to the table, that the buyer had some cash. They just didn't have the credit worthiness. And the seller had the performer, the numbers looked good. The business was sellable. We overcame check mark number one. Then we get down to the buyer's perspective, and the buyer did not pass the banker's sniff test. I have another situation where the whole deal was put together. The lawyers had the documents drafted, good to go, and then the buyers were approved. They were approved. But the lending capabilities they went for fell through last minute. And then the business owner who was selling had to do a seller carry, which is not my favorite. I try to keep clients from doing that because it's a little bit more risk than I would desire. But they ended up having to have a seller carry. They were so far down the hole that it didn't make sense to back up. So the bankers are the next roadblock that you could potentially face. The third roadblock you could face is your employees. Think about it. No one loves change. No one likes change. No one even accepts change many times. But one thing is certain, the change is happening. It's going to happen. But here you are now in front of your team. You're trying to decide when you're going to tell them that you're selling the business. When are you going to tell them that you're merging the business with another company? You're trying to tell your team because you know you need them. You need your team to service the customers that you've given your word to. Your team, by the way, needs you. They need the job. They need the money. And so here you are now, not only dealing with lawyers and bankers and buyers, but now you're dealing with the people that you work with day in, day out, and you're trying to affirm and assure them that the process to which you're going to embark as an organization is in their best interest. No one likes change. Here's where it gets even trickier. The transition may not be weeks. The transition could perhaps take months or years to get the deal done. Your team is going to have that fear, that fight or flight response. Fear is going to come in. Self-preservation is going to come about. And you as the owner who wants to get the deal done has yet another roadblock that you've got to overcome and you've got to be prepared for and how you're going to deal with your team, the people that you love, the people that you've been in the trenches with. You've got to be able to prepare for them. A fourth roadblock is your customers, your clients. Without your customers or clients, you don't have a business. So how do you move through this transition to make sure that your customers and clients stay? There are some businesses out there that require clients to sign off on a transition where others don't. But perhaps you're in a business now where you have to tell the client about why you're transitioning, what's in it for them, all these various things. And if you have a major attrition or a major exodus of clients out of your business, you know that it can impact your value. You know that it can impact your desires. So informing your clients how you're going to deal with their self-preservation is huge. Now think about this. If you're like me, you have clients that have been your clientele for a long time. They've become more than clients. They become friends, perhaps even family. And you've got to think about how they're going to take this. Because again, no one likes change. So you've got to leave no surprises. You've got to anticipate every customer question. You've got to provide information supporting your decision. No one likes change. So your customers are in the midst of this. And then finally, but definitely not least, the biggest roadblock you're going to have is you, the seller, and the buyer. From a seller's perspective, you often become your own worst enemy. From the seller's perspective, you end up self-deprivating. You end up causing atrophy because you take your eye off. The company has to produce revenue. I actually write about this in my book called The Ultimate Sale. One of the things that buyers love to see is they like to see the business owner watch the business move down during the transition. Never a good thing. And then you're going to have the buyer. And the buyer is going to be pushing and pulling and quit moving. And between the two of you, you're going to be handling multiple different emotions, multiple different objections, tempers, fears, sadness. You see, friends, the buyer and the seller at the end of the day is what matters. Everybody else is there. They're there to support the deal. They're there to support the business. But if the buyer and seller can't agree, there is no consummation. There is no exit. So I bring you this because from this last 6-7 months, friends, I've seen so many business owners not anticipate the transaction. Selling a business is hard. And there are many, 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 many roadblocks. Friends, it's harder than selling a house. And I firmly believe you've already probably done that if you're listening to this episode or this show. You've probably sold a house. Selling a business is much, much more complicated than selling a house. And you know how hard it was to sell a house. So if you're considering selling your business in the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you're going to need a coach. You're going to need an exit planner who can prepare you, your team, the company, the clientele for the ultimate sale. You say, Justin, man, that sounds amazing. I can only aspire to have my dream house, my hot rod car, my vacations, my exotic hunting trip, whatever it is that you aspire to have. Many times it won't happen unless you can get the deal to close. And just like I learned early in my career, back when I had an insurance license, there's a lot of people who don't have a vested interest in making the deal past the finish line. There's a lot of people. A lot of self-preservation that occurs during this transaction. So friends, I challenge you to start thinking about this. If you need help, hey, pick up my book, The Ultimate Sale. Maybe you can pick up the newest book, Your Baby's Ugly. If you need help, reach out to us. This is what we do. We have a team of professionals that can help you. We can help you. Until next time, friends, I realize life is hard. I get it. Life is hard. This is complicated. Dealing with business exit, holy cow, it is complicated. It doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all make it a great day.